Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, it is brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets, take your profit. Find out how. Go to PropSwap.com. Download the PropSwap app today. Geoff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. Don't forget, our Eagles draft party is live on April the 28th. We will be at Slack Tide Brewing Company, and one lucky winner will get a chance to pick their trip. You will get to pick an Eagles road game this year, thanks to our friends at Philly Sports Trips and Ernest & Sons Old Fashioned Butcher Shop. We will start entering people on Monday's show. So listen for your chance to enter starting Monday. Thursday, I'll be live for the Sports Bash at Slack Tide Brewing Company. And then one lucky winner will get an Eagles road trip this year. And some interesting places on the road to go this year. Geoff Mosher, what's up, brother?
How you doing, my friend?
I'm all good. It's good to have the draft party back. We haven't had a draft party in like 3 years.
True. And in true Mike Gill fashion, I see you found a brewery to have it at, so that makes sense.
I did not pick the place. The place picks me.
Well, you know, when you
No.
when you dabble in certain areas,
yeah.
Mike.
I actually don't know who the salesperson was who got that place to, but I am very excited because I really genuinely like Slack Tide. In fact, we did our 99 Bottles show at Vagabond in EHT, and somebody walked up to the table. I didn't see the guy, and he put a 6-pack of Slack Tide down on the table and, like, anonymously walked away. And I was like, whoa, where'd that guy go with the Slack Tide?
That's a drop if I ever heard right there.
Yeah, he did. It was like a little variety pack.
Yeah. Wound up being a little harbinger for you.
There you go. So we're doing the show there on Thursday, April 28th, Eagles draft party, and one winner is going to go to an Eagles road game, so you'll get to pick your trip. Eagles draft, we're inside 1 month here, Geoff Mosher. Now, I want to pick your brain a little bit yesterday, Jeff Lurie, on some of the things he said. Let's start with some of the draft thoughts, because there had been some thoughts that Jeff Lurie had been dabbling into football decisions a little bit. And I don't know that he threw his right-hand man, Howie Roseman, under the bus there, but I didn't take J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. That was that guy that I just signed to a 3-year extension.
Yeah, you got that too, that the guys that he occasionally put his input or influence or rooted for just happened to be, you know, Lane Johnson, one of the best right tackles in the league, Jordan Mailata, one of the great success stories of the franchise here in the draft, and, of course, Russell Wilson, who's been a great quarterback for a team. The Eagles just weren't getting him. But the guy that he's kind of been linked to, and we know that, you know, we've reported it, we know that he was heavily influential on the J.J. Arcega-Whiteside pick. Nope, that wasn't me. Didn't do it. Just a tie. I said, go. You have my blessing either way.
Right.
I
so
mean,
we had a tie in the we had a tie in the room. We have a tie in the room, and Howie Roseman got to break the tie, and he's the one that wanted this J.J. Arcega-Whiteside.
Now you know why Howie has a 3-year extension, why he's had the security that he's had, and now you also know why every 3 or 4 years there's some unexplainable, strange turmoil that seems to pop up in the Eagles front office or ownership. It's because, you know, I hate to say it and be cry because I know that they've been a good team, but I mean, there's an element of finger pointing and avoiding of blame that goes on that starts at the top.
Oh, I agree. But this is like the whole Howie Roseman enigma, is that he gets just blamed for everything and we never know. And it's almost like he just says, okay, you want to say I took Marcus Smith? Fine, I took him. When we don't really know who was the person in charge, or hey, you want to blame me for taking Nelson Aguilar? All right, I'm the one who took Nelson Aguilar. I don't care. Like, he's like, I'm untouchable, so I'll take the blame if you want me to take the blame.
We could do, you know, hours on the dynamics of the Eagles front office and pull back a lot of layers to the onion. You know, Jeffrey, Howie, they always like to tout the overall success of the franchise, and there's no doubt about it. They are among the more successful franchises as far as wins. And, you know, being able to make the playoffs, I would say that I think that if you look at their Andy Reid eras and compare their consistency after Andy Reid's been gone, yes, they've won a Super Bowl, but they have been very high and low since. And Andy has gone out in Kansas City, and, you know, you never hear a word about Clark Hunt or any of the owners there. And he's got his own people, and they're far more consistent in what they do. But, I feel like you can't talk about the Eagles' success over the last 25 years without the Andy Reid element to it. And I think maybe what we'll see over the next 5 or so years is, did the Eagles, were they able to replace that consistency that Andy Reid brought them when it was really about Howie and Jeff and whoever they hired? Or are they going to be able to get that back and show that they are a good functional franchise that can sustain success and not and react well to success?
Well, how much influence did Andy have in terms of how much does it still carry over in the way that they run the organization, the way they draft, the way they run things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that their influence, the Andy Reid's influence that he left behind here, how he came up through Andy's coaching tenure and Joe Banner, and the team always built in the trenches. They were an inside-out team, and that remains to this day. The need to have strong offensive line and defensive line is something Andy brought to this franchise. And you could say, hey, Buddy brought it too. Buddy was always big on defensive linemen, but that was really, but that predates Jeffrey Lurie. So Lurie brings in Andy. It's his first real long-time coach, and obviously the emphasis on the trenches and also the emphasis on having a dynamic quarterback to be a franchise quarterback, which is what Jeffrey Lurie commonly used to say was very important and absolute must. And yet, if you heard him in front of the podium yesterday, he sort of was like, well, you never know. He didn't downplay the need for it, but all of a sudden his tune was more like, you just really never know if you're getting it. Look at Josh Allen. They didn't know what they were getting when they picked him. And I thought that was a little bit of a disingenuous statement on his part too, for a guy who has talked about the importance of getting and doing everything you can.
Well, is that his way? Is that his way to kind of soften the, hey, we're keeping Jalen Hurts?
Probably, but again, they kind of twist narratives to suit whatever's going on at the time. From being the first team to ever say that we really believe in drafting backup quarterbacks in the second round when that's never been done before, with any kind of notoriety.
Well, how much though, after hearing all the stuff that's coming out about Carson Wentz in Indianapolis, is that the Eagles being ahead of the game and saying, this wasn't about taking a backup quarterback in the second round. This was, my God, this guy, we just don't believe in anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give him too much credit, because if at any point Carson Wentz said, I'll come back, he would have been back. They didn't trade him because they were done with him. They traded him because he made it clear he was done with them. So you can say they kind of lucked into it, sort of like how you throw a lot of money at Byron Jones and he says, no, I'd rather go to Miami for virtually the same deal. And then you have to trade for Darius Slay, who winds up being a way better player. So I don't want to give him too much credit for that, but they certainly, you give him credit for being able to get what they got in return, and knowing that Carson, who he was and how he struggled after that looks better for them. Certainly.
So of all this stuff, the stuff that's coming out in Indianapolis, I mean, Irsay essentially just said, look, we had to get rid of this guy. It just seemed that to a man out there that they just felt they could not move forward with him. Are you surprised at how much the snowball is rolling down the hill at him right now?
I'm surprised at how much Jim Irsay felt, and not that I probably shouldn't be, because Irsay is one of the more, forthright owners in the league and says what's on his mind. And so is Chris Ballard. But even Irsay, who really was the driving force behind this, had no issue throwing Carson Wentz under the bus.
Zero issue.
No, none at all. And yet it's funny. You have that, and then you have the Washington welcoming him with open arms. Talk about the opposite dynamics there.
Well, I mean, you have an organization in Washington that has been so dysfunctional that it's almost like they're not smart enough to understand what they're getting into.
Yeah,
right?
And they're not patient enough. Clearly, think about this: Washington said to itself, with Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew, we can't wait. We need to have a quarterback now. Maybe we'll draft one, but we got to have something better right now. So let's immediately go out and give up assets for Carson Wentz. The Colts were basically like, I don't care if I don't have a backup quarterback or a plan, or I don't like any of these draft quarterbacks. We're getting rid of them. And bam, all of a sudden Matt Ryan becomes available. You think Washington was like, oh man, maybe if we just had a little bit more,
This is interesting because the athletic piece, it was that Zach Kiefer who wrote that piece. He said, he painted this picture that Wentz was essentially never liked or respected from the second he walked in the door there. We're not embracing it. And it was almost like you're the teacher's pet almost. You were handpicked by this guy to come here and just didn't – I don't know, did he – I've had people tell me, that Carson's never really had to – he's always been handed stuff. So was it this perception that he wasn't very liked or respected because Carson walked in hey, I'm the starting quarterback? Not that he wasn't, but I don't know. It's just the quote was, over the course of the year, some grew frustrated at what they deemed a lack of leadership, a resistance to hard coaching, and a reckless style of play, which had a role in several close losses over the year. Part, so that's nothing new. We've heard that here before, right?
But I think I think the B of that A, B, and C is the thing that's widespread. The lack of wanting to be coached and how you respond to coaching. Some guys don't respond to coaching in that they're told what to do. They go out there and they don't do it, right? Because it just doesn't compute to them, or it's not comfortable to them. Carson, as we knew in Philadelphia, and then obviously out in Indianapolis, not only didn't take to the coaching from what he did on the field, but he took offense to the coaching and let that be known how he felt about it. And to the point where he was looked at by his teammates as, what, you're different from us? I got an offensive line coach screaming at me if I give up a half a sack out of 70 plays. You make 5 or 6 reckless plays that cost us a game, and the coaches try to talk to you about it, and all you do is resist and tell them it's them, and it's not you, and that's who you are. So that's where I feel the respect factor. I don't know if it was as soon as he walked through the door. I feel like it's more that they watch this guy try to get coached and act like he's a finished product and perfect and the next Tom Brady, and then sit there and fight with coaches on what he is and what he needs to do. And yet they're all getting coached the same way, if not harder, and they have to take it. And so it's not an equal system there for everybody who's not a franchise quarterback.
Speak of the respect factor, Malcom Jenkins retired today, 13 years. There may not be a player who has more respect in the locker room than Malcom Jenkins. I've had him on the show plenty of times. We had him on at Radio Row, out at the Super Bowl. Was always a very willing interview and always was willing to criticize people. I think he was the one guy who could take shots at his own teammates and get away with it. But your dealings with Malcom and what he meant to the Super Bowl team, because obviously he's won 2 Super Bowls, went to 3 Pro Bowls, all with Philadelphia. And when he was signed in 2014, he wasn't the safety that everybody wanted. It was almost we got stuck with Malcom Jenkins. But I don't know that they win a Super Bowl where that whole thing over that little run stays together without him.
Nope, they certainly don't. He goes down as one of the best free agent signings in the history of the franchise, one of the great leaders of the franchise, one of the great players in franchise history. I imagine he'll be back. He might. We'll see if he gets a Wall of Fame type of or Eagles Hall of Fame type of nod. I think that he makes a pretty good argument, even though he wasn't here for 10 years. But his impact was undeniable. And for me, Mike, you have to remember. I don't even know if we talked about this, but I was a reporter covering a lot of high school sports in North and Central Jersey. Before I came down in this area in 2005, and I covered that Piscataway team that Malcom was on that won, I think what they were called sectional titles at the time because they didn't play, beyond their region of the state. So I got to know Malcom a little bit in high school and cover him. And you could just even tell then, that he was not just a very good player and a very good athlete, but someone who was his football intelligence and just non-football intelligence were through the roof. He was extraordinarily mature. He played on a great Piscataway team that had 2 other first-round picks on that team, but he was clearly the guy that team that was the glue to that team. So I've known Malcom since he was a high school kid, and it's not surprising to me at all to see the success that he's had in the NFL.
Yeah, that's wild to say. You watch this guy as an 18-year-old kid. He goes to Ohio State. He gets drafted in the first round by the Saints, and he ends up playing here and then really took off when he got here. Jim Schwartz really used him all over the place. And I don't know that those defenses Jim Schwartz was able to do when Malcom left that year. You saw that he just didn't have that guy to be kind of his Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, it's funny how things happen. Like, he's drafted by the Saints to be kind of a Tampa 2-like or a cover 2 corner, which you don't need blazing speed for, and he didn't have blazing speed. He was just a really good cornerback. And then they sort of changed their defense up. They moved him to safety. Then obviously the Eagles, he wasn't even the top safety on the market. A lot of fans at the time wanted Jarius Byrd from the Bills because he was a interception machine, but he wasn't a well-rounded player. Certainly not like Malcom is. And even when Malcom came to the Eagles, Mike, he automatically got thrust into a leadership role as a first-year Eagle because DeMeco Ryans, who was the heart and soul of the defense at the time, wound up tearing his Achilles again, right? So that put Malcom as one of the leaders of an emerging defense that was coming together. And then even in 2017, Malcom doesn't really become the Swiss Army knife that we become to know him as until the Eagles get really hit with injuries at the linebacker position. Jordan Hicks went down. Somebody else, I believe, went down, and they needed to take him as more of a safety, but then also like kind of that box linebacker. And then the next year after that, when Patrick Robinson leaves, you got Malcom playing slot corner at times. So there was an evolution. He didn't just come here as a Swiss Army knife who did everything. That evolved some part because of bad luck with injuries and then and circumstance. Jim needed him to do more, and he could take it.
Yeah, and I don't know. Are you surprised? I'm not surprised at all at 34 years old, but I'm sure he could probably play if he wanted to, but we always kind of could see that Malcom had other things going on, and I guess he's ready to kind of pursue the next phase of his life.
I was surprised he played 13 years because I remember, I think it was after the Super Bowl year or maybe after 2018. I remember talking to Malcom about how long he was going to play. And he said that in his mind, he was always going to play 10 years. And after 10 years, he was going to kind of evaluate how his body felt, where he was at, what he had accomplished, and could he still play the game at a high enough level. And even though he could after 10 years, I didn't see him sticking around 3 more. I thought maybe another year, go for one more Super Bowl on a good team. But he stuck around longer than I thought he would.
Which is interesting because you just talked about reevaluate his body and all that stuff. I mean, he's played, the most snaps on his team since 2014, every single season. He played in 98.6% of the snaps, including a streak of 2,651 snaps straight. So this is a guy who never got a break. He just never came off the field.
No, he was an Iron Man. I mean, John Runyon, we think of Iron Men usually as guys in the trenches, like John Runyon. He was the Iron Man of the Eagles because he had started so many games. But for the position like safety, the way Malcom played it, which was you're deep, you're in the box, you're in nickel, you're moving around, you're making a ton of tackles, you're playing 1,000 snaps, and having a lot of collisions and a lot of tackles. 13 years and all those snaps he took is very impressive.
Geoff Mosher, InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast. Make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcast. Another great edition of Football at 4. It went by very quickly today. Malcom Jenkins retired 13 years in the books. And, of course, tomorrow Andrew's here. We'll talk a little draft with him. Adam, with more of his notes from the owners' meetings, is on Friday. And, Jeff, we'll talk to you next week, pal.
Yeah, by the way, real quick, the biggest thing about me covering Malcom in high school is that I just feel really old now. That he's retired. Think about that.
I know, man. It's funny because I see this all the time. They had this there's a local football league down here, the Atlantic County Junior Football League, and they just had like their 65th year of like a banquet the other day, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, I played in that league in 1989.
Oh, man. Yeah. We're old, man. We're old. Jeez, but we're good.
Thanks.
Oldies but goodies.
All right, brother.
See you, man.
Take care. There's Geoff Mosher. Make sure you guys check out InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast.